I never imagined I'd find myself here, recounting the events that shattered my life. My name is James, and I've been married to Emily for 5 years. We have a beautiful 4-year-old daughter named Mia. From the outside, we seemed like the perfect family. Emily and I met through mutual friends and quickly fell in love. Our relationship was filled with laughter, shared dreams, and promises of forever. However, recently, things began to change. The warmth that once radiated between us turned cold. Emily's laughter, once frequent and genuine, became rare and hollow. She started coming home late, claiming work kept her busy. But something in her explanations felt off. It was as if she was trying too hard to convince me, and maybe herself, that everything was fine. The first hint of trouble came a few months ago. Emily became overly protective of her phone, never letting it out of her sight. It seemed odd, but I shrugged it off, not wanting to appear paranoid. I trusted her. After all, trust is the bedrock of any marriage, right? But the small things began to add up. Emily's frequent absences, the hushed phone conversations, and her distant demeanor created a gnawing suspicion in me. I tried talking to her about it, but our conversations often ended in arguments, with her accusing me of being controlling and insecure. One evening, after a particularly heated argument, Emily stormed out of the house. Left alone with Mia, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I began to notice patterns in her behavior that I had previously ignored. Her business trips became more frequent, and she seemed more invested in her appearance than usual. The makeup, the new clothes, the constant checking of her reflection. It all seemed like she was trying to impress someone. I shared my concerns with my best friend Tom. He listened patiently and advised me to keep a close eye on things without jumping to conclusions. Sometimes we see what we want to see, he said. But deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining things. It was during one of her trips that my suspicions reached a boiling point. Emily had left for what she called a work conference in Boston. She was supposed to be gone for 3 days. On the second day, I decided to give her a call. She answered, but her voice was hurried, and I could hear a man's voice in the background. She quickly brushed it off, saying she was at a networking event and couldn't talk. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with possibilities. I hated feeling like this. Suspicious, paranoid, betrayed. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called Emily's office the next morning, pretending to be a client. To my surprise, her assistant informed me that there was no conference in Boston. My heart pounded as I hung up the phone. The lies were now undeniable. I felt a mix of anger, fear, and sadness wash over me. What was she hiding? And who was she with? I knew I needed to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I couldn't live in this state of limbo, constantly questioning my wife's fidelity. So I decided to do some digging. Little did I know, the truth I was about to uncover would be far more devastating than I could ever imagine. With the truth gnawing at me, I took a desperate step. I searched Emily's desk at home, hoping to find something that would confirm my worst fears. It didn't take long. Among the clutter of bills and receipts, I found an invoice from a hotel in Boston. It wasn't the type of place one would stay for a business conference. This was a luxury boutique hotel, the kind you book for a romantic getaway. The receipt had her name, the dates of her stay, and a room number, 304. My heart pounded in my chest as I read the details. I couldn't believe this was happening. I decided I had to confront her, to see with my own eyes what was going on. I called Emily's mother and asked if she could watch Mia for a few days, fabricating a story about a sudden work trip. Thankfully, she agreed without hesitation. The drive to Boston was a blur. My mind raced with thoughts of betrayal and anger. I arrived at the hotel in the late afternoon, my heart hammering in my chest. I approached the front desk, trying to appear calm as I asked for a room key. "I'm here to surprise my wife," I said, forcing a smile. The clerk, a young woman with a friendly smile, didn't suspect a thing and handed me a key card. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, each ding making my anxiety worse. I stood outside room 304, my hand trembling as I swiped the key card. The door clicked open, and I pushed it ajar. What I saw next made my blood boil. There, on the bed, was Emily with her ex-husband Jake. They were completely wrapped up in each other, oblivious to my presence. The sight of them, tangled in sheets and passion, made me sick to my stomach. "Emily, what the fuck?" I shouted, my voice cracking with a mix of rage and pain. They both froze, their eyes wide with shock and guilt. Emily scrambled to cover herself, but it was too late. The damage was done. Jake, however, had the nerve to look defiant. "James, I can explain," Emily started, but I wasn't interested in her lies anymore. Before I knew it, I had crossed the room and grabbed Jake by the collar. My fist connected with his face, the satisfying crunch of his nose breaking under my knuckles. He yelled in pain, blood streaming down his face as he fell back onto the bed. "Get the hell out!" I shouted at him, barely able to contain my fury. "And don't you ever come near my wife again!" Jake scrambled to his feet, clutching his broken nose, and hurriedly gathered his clothes. He left the room without another word, leaving Emily and me in a tense, suffocating silence. "How could you do this to me?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "How could you betray me like this?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were from guilt, fear, or both. "James, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. It's just, I was lonely, and Jake, he was there." "Lonely?" I scoffed, feeling a bitter laugh escape my lips. "You think I'm not lonely? You think this justifies cheating on me? On us? On Mia?" She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I know it doesn't. I was wrong, I was stupid, but please, we can work through this." I shook my head, the betrayal cutting too deep. "I don't know, Emily. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Emily in tears. The hallway felt like a tunnel, the walls closing in on me as I made my way to the elevator. The ride down to the lobby was a blur, and I found myself outside, gulping in the cold air, trying to steady my racing heart. The drive back home was agonizing. I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my mind, the image of Emily and Jake seared into my memory. How had things come to this? How had the woman I loved turned into a stranger? When I arrived back at Emily's mother's house to pick up Mia, I forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil inside me. "Thanks for watching her," I said, keeping my voice steady. "No problem, James," she replied, not sensing anything amiss. As Mia and I drove home, her innocent chatter in the back seat was a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I knew I had to confront Emily again, to figure out what came next for us, for our family. But one thing was clear: things would never be the same. Back home, the weight of what I had seen in that hotel room hung over me like a dark cloud. Emily had destroyed everything I thought we had, and the betrayal was too much to bear. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. I needed to confront her and make her face the consequences of her actions. That evening, after putting Mia to bed, I sat in the living room waiting for Emily to come home. I didn't call or text her. I wanted her to walk into the storm she had created. When she finally walked through the door, her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She looked at me, a mix of guilt and fear on her face. "James, please, let me explain," she started, but I cut her off. "Explain what, Emily? Explain how you could throw away our marriage for your ex-husband? Explain how you could betray me and our daughter?" My voice was loud, echoing through the house. "James, I was lonely. You were always working, and Jake, he was there for me. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake," she pleaded, stepping closer. "A mistake?" I shouted, standing up and towering over her. "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. Cheating on your husband is not a mistake, it's a choice, a series of deliberate choices." She sobbed, her tears falling freely. "Please, James. I love you. I don't want to lose our family." "Family? You destroyed our family the moment you let that bastard into our bed." I felt my anger reaching a boiling point. "I can't believe I ever trusted you. I know I messed up, but we can work through this. We can go to therapy, talk to someone. Please, James, don't throw everything away," she begged, reaching for my hand. I pulled away, my voice cold and firm. "No, Emily, you threw everything away. I can't live with someone who betrayed me so completely." Her sobs turned to anger. "So, you're just going to give up on us? On Mia?" I shook my head. Mia deserves better. She deserves parents who respect each other, who trust each other. Right now, that's not us. The realization of what I was saying hit her, and she looked at me with wide, desperate eyes. "James, please, don't do this. Don't end us like this." "I didn't end us, Emily, you did." Now pack your things and leave, I demanded, my voice shaking with the intensity of my emotions. Where am I supposed to go? She cried, her voice breaking. I don't care. Call Jake. Stay with your mother. Just get out, I said, pointing towards the door. Emily looked at me, her face a mixture of despair and defiance. She slowly walked towards our bedroom, tears streaming down her face. I followed her, watching as she hastily threw clothes and personal items into a suitcase. The sight of her packing, the physical manifestation of our broken marriage, was almost too much to bear. As she zipped up her suitcase, she turned to me one last time. James, I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it all back. Sorry isn't enough, Emily. Just go, I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. She picked up her suitcase and walked towards the door. With one final look, she stepped out into the night, the door closing behind her with a deafening finality. I stood there for a moment, the silence of the house pressing down on me. The reality of what had just happened began to sink in. I had kicked my wife out of our home, the home we had built together. The anger and betrayal still roiled inside me, but there was also a profound sadness. I went to check on Mia, who was sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the turmoil that had erupted in our lives. I gently kissed her forehead, a silent promise that I would protect her from the pain that had torn me apart. Returning to the living room, I collapsed onto the couch, my head in my hands. The weight of the day's events finally broke me, and I cried. The tears flowed freely, a release of all the anger, hurt, and betrayal that had built up inside me. This was the end of one chapter of my life. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with uncertainties and challenges. But as I sat there, the reality of my new life slowly sinking in, I knew one thing: I would survive. For Mia and for myself, I would find a way to move forward. The days that followed were a blur of anger, heartbreak, and a fierce determination to regain control over my shattered life. Emily had tried calling and texting, but I ignored her. I couldn't bear to hear more of her lies and excuses. I was a mess, but amidst the chaos, a dark thought started to take root in my mind. I wanted revenge. I wanted to make her and Jake feel a fraction of the pain they had caused me. I started with Jake. I found out where he worked through some online snooping. It wasn't hard. He had a prominent position at a local law firm. I decided to pay him a visit, not in a physical sense, but in a way that would hit him where it hurt, his reputation. I spent hours crafting an email to his firm's managing partner. I detailed everything: the affair, the betrayal, and how it was all happening during work hours. I attached the hotel receipt as evidence, making sure to point out that the dates matched with the times he had claimed to be at the office. It was a calculated move, designed to create maximum damage. Once the email was sent, I waited. I knew it wouldn't take long for the fallout to begin, and I was right. Within a few days, I heard through the grapevine that Jake had been suspended pending an internal investigation. His career, his carefully crafted professional life, was now hanging by a thread. Next, I turned my focus to Emily. She was still trying to reach out, sending long, heartfelt messages that I deleted without reading. I wanted her to feel as isolated and abandoned as I did. I decided to make sure she had nowhere to turn. I called Emily's mother. I need to tell you something, I began, my voice steady but cold. I laid it all out, sparing no details. The affair, the lies, the betrayal. Her mother was shocked, horrified even. She promised to speak to Emily, but I could sense her disappointment and anger. Then, I reached out to a few of our mutual friends. Did you know? I asked each of them. Did you know she was cheating on me with Jake? Their reactions varied from disbelief to anger, but the result was the same. They sided with me. Emily was effectively ostracized from our social circle, left with no support network. My final act of revenge was both simple and cruel. I knew Emily loved her car. It was her prized possession, a brand new, flashy SUV she had insisted on getting despite my protests about the cost. I took the spare key and drove it to a remote part of town, far from any prying eyes. There I left it with the keys inside, doors unlocked. It didn't take long for it to disappear. When Emily called, frantic about her missing car, I feigned ignorance, suggesting she must have misplaced it. It was petty, but it gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. Each act of revenge was a momentary balm for my wounded pride, but the relief was always fleeting. I realized that hurting them didn't heal me. It just added to the bitterness and anger inside me. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone consumed by rage and a desire for retribution. One evening, after another day of plotting and brooding, Mia came up to me, her innocent eyes full of concern. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked, her small hand resting on my arm. Her question pierced through the fog of my anger. I looked at her, seeing the worry etched on her young face, and I realized how my actions were affecting her. I had been so focused on revenge that I had neglected the one person who mattered most. I pulled her into my arms, holding her close. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm just going through a tough time, but I promise everything will be all right." That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about what I had become. The man I saw in the mirror was unrecognizable, consumed by a need for vengeance that had taken over my life. I knew I couldn't continue down this path. I had to find a way to move past the anger and focus on healing, for Mia's sake and for my own. Revenge had been a bitter comfort, but it wasn't a solution. It was time to let go of the need to hurt those who had hurt me, and start the difficult journey toward rebuilding my life. The morning after my epiphany with Mia, I woke up feeling a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Revenge had only deepened my wounds, and it was time to shift my focus to what truly mattered: my daughter and my own healing. I needed to make a definitive decision about my future, one that would provide stability for Mia and allow me to start rebuilding my life. I began by contacting a lawyer, a recommendation from my friend Tom. Her name was Linda, and from our first meeting, I felt reassured by her professionalism and empathy. We discussed my situation in detail, and she advised me on the steps needed to file for divorce and ensure Mia's well-being. "You have a strong case for custody, given the circumstances," Linda said, reviewing the evidence of Emily's infidelity. "But it's important to handle this with as much grace as possible, for your daughter's sake." I nodded, taking in her words. "I want what's best for Mia. I just don't see a future with Emily anymore. The trust is gone." "Understandable," Linda replied. "We'll proceed with the paperwork and aim for an amicable resolution, but be prepared for resistance." That evening, I called Emily. It was the first time we had spoken since I kicked her out. Her voice was strained, tired, as she answered. "James? Emily, we need to talk," I began, my voice calm but firm. "I've decided to file for divorce." There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I understand. I knew this was coming. We need to discuss custody arrangements for Mia. I want to ensure she's taken care of, that she has stability and support," I continued, trying to keep my emotions in check. Emily sniffled, clearly holding back tears. "Of course, Mia comes first. We can work something out." We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a park where Mia often played. When Emily arrived, she looked like a shadow of her former self. The confident, vibrant woman I had once loved was now haggard and broken. It was a painful reminder of how far we had fallen. As Mia played on the swings, we sat on a nearby bench and discussed the terms of our separation. Emily agreed to shared custody, understanding that Mia needed both of her parents, despite our differences. We also discussed the division of assets, aiming for a fair settlement that would allow us both to move forward. "James, I'm so sorry for everything," Emily said, her eyes filled with regret. "I know I've hurt you deeply, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." "I appreciate that, Emily," I replied, my tone softening slightly. "But we need to focus on Mia and her well-being. That's all that matters now." As the weeks passed, we navigated the legal process of divorce. It was painful and exhausting, but with Linda's guidance, we managed to keep things civil. Emily moved in with her mother temporarily, and we established a routine for Mia that allowed her to spend time with both of us. During this period, I focused on rebuilding my life. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Mitchell, who helped me process my emotions and find a path toward healing. "It's important to acknowledge your pain, James, but also to look forward. You have a future beyond this betrayal," he often reminded me. I also reconnected with friends and family, leaning on them for support. Tom was a constant presence, always ready with a listening ear or a word of encouragement. My sister, Susan, also reached out, offering to help with Mia whenever I needed a break. Through therapy and the support of my loved ones, I began to find a sense of peace. I enrolled Mia in a local preschool, and seeing her thrive brought a new sense of purpose to my life. Her laughter and joy were a daily reminder of what I was fighting for. One day, as I watched Mia play in the yard, I realized that I was no longer consumed by anger and bitterness. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined me. I had made a decision to let go of the past and focus on building a better future for both of us. Emily and I continued to co-parent, maintaining a respectful, if distant, relationship for Mia's sake. Over time, the animosity between us faded, replaced by a mutual understanding of our roles as parents. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. As I signed the papers, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. It was the end of a chapter, but also the beginning of a new one. I looked forward to the future with hope and determination, ready to embrace whatever came next. In the quiet moments after the final meeting with Linda, I took a deep breath and allowed myself to feel a sense of accomplishment. I had survived the storm, and now it was time to rebuild. For Mia, for myself, and for the life we deserved. The divorce was behind me, and life took on a new rhythm. It was a life without the constant weight of betrayal and anger. Instead, it was filled with moments of clarity, healing, and the unwavering love of my daughter, Mia. Every day was a step forward, a step towards rebuilding a life of stability and happiness. My mornings started early, getting Mia ready for preschool. Our routine became a comforting ritual, from making breakfast together to singing her favorite songs on the way to school. Her laughter was my lifeline, a reminder of the innocence and joy that still existed despite the turmoil. Work also became an anchor. I threw myself into my projects, finding solace in the structure and purpose it provided. My colleagues, who had been supportive through my darkest times, noticed the change in me. I was more focused, more driven, and slowly, my professional life began to thrive once again. But it wasn't just work that helped me heal. I made a conscious effort to reconnect with the parts of myself that had been neglected. I picked up hobbies I had long abandoned. Photography became a passion, capturing moments of beauty and serenity that I had previously overlooked. Hiking and spending time in nature also became a sanctuary, a way to clear my mind and find peace. One weekend, I took Mia on a hiking trip to a nearby nature reserve. She loved the adventure, her excitement infectious as we explored the trails and discovered hidden waterfalls. As we sat on a rock, eating our packed lunch, I looked at her and felt a surge of gratitude. Despite everything, we were building new memories, creating a new life together. "Look, Daddy! A butterfly!" Mia exclaimed, pointing to a vibrant monarch fluttering nearby. I smiled, watching the butterfly dance in the sunlight. "It's beautiful, just like you, Mia," she giggled, her eyes sparkling with joy. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart. Always," I replied, pulling her into a hug. Back at home, I focused on creating a nurturing environment for Mia. Our small house became a haven filled with warmth and love. I redecorated her room, adding colorful murals and fairy lights that made her eyes light up with delight. We spent evenings reading stories, playing games, and simply enjoying each other's company. Despite the challenges, Emily and I managed to co-parent effectively. Our interactions remained civil, and we kept our focus on Mia's well-being. Over time, the raw edges of our relationship softened, replaced by a mutual respect for our roles as parents. We communicated regularly about Mia's progress and worked together to ensure she felt secure and loved. One evening, after dropping Mia off at Emily's, I decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. The cool breeze and the quiet streets provided a moment of reflection. As I passed by a familiar cafe, I noticed a group of people gathered for a live music night. On a whim, I decided to go in. The atmosphere was inviting, filled with soft melodies and the hum of conversations. I ordered a coffee and found a seat near the stage. As I sipped my drink, I noticed a woman sitting alone at a nearby table. She had a book open in front of her, but she seemed more interested in the music than in reading. Our eyes met and she smiled. "Great music, isn't it?" she said, gesturing towards the stage. I nodded, returning her smile. "Yeah, it's nice. A perfect way to unwind after a long week." We started talking, and I learned that her name was Sarah. She was a teacher, passionate about her work and equally passionate about music and books. Our conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of something new, something hopeful. As the evening progressed, we shared stories about our lives, our struggles, and our dreams. It was refreshing to connect with someone on such a genuine level. When the night came to an end, we exchanged numbers, agreeing to meet again. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and I saw each other more often. We took things slow, enjoying each other's company without rushing into anything. She was kind, understanding, and her presence brought a sense of calm and happiness that I hadn't felt in a long time. Introducing Sarah to Mia was a big step, but it felt right. Mia took to her immediately, charmed by Sarah's warmth and playful nature. Seeing them together filled me with hope for the future, a future that was beginning to look brighter. Through Sarah, I learned to trust again. She showed me that it was possible to move past the pain and open my heart to new possibilities. Our relationship blossomed naturally, built on mutual respect and understanding. As the months turned into a year, my life had transformed in ways I never thought possible. The anger and bitterness that once consumed me had faded, replaced by a sense of peace and contentment. I had found a new rhythm, a new purpose, and a new love. Reflecting on my journey, I realized how far I had come. The betrayal and heartbreak were now part of my past, but they no longer defined me. I had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more determined to create a life filled with love and joy. For Mia, for Sarah, and for myself, I had found a way to move forward. And in doing so, I had discovered that even in the face of the deepest pain, there is always a path to healing and happiness.